Hello everyone, my name is Sophia Laengle, and I'm excited to be part of this valuable conference today. In this talk, I will be talking about the experience of light, the role of natural light in understanding architecture as a cinematic experience. About myself, I was born in Austria, and after completing my bachelor in architecture at the University of Liechtenstein, I moved to San Diego for my master's degree in architecture with a focus on neuroscience. After graduating, aside from work, I tried to spend at least a day a week at the Salk Institute for Biological Studies. This gives me the opportunity to increase my knowledge on neuroscience for architecture and find more ways to apply these findings in the design process. The past year taught me to rethink the way I was seeing and designing buildings. Throughout my master's degree, I learned to see architects as the storytellers of a time. Their buildings represent different cultures as well as technical progress. But the building's presence does not only influence our landscape and history, it also impacts us humans mentally and physically. Architects plan spaces in which people will live. We inhabit these spaces, and with it, we are exposed to their decisions. People often refer to aesthetical preferences when it comes to such discussions. But there's another layer that yet seems to be forgotten, our senses. Through including neuroscientific and biological research to the design process, architects will be able to, as Juhani Pallasmaa wrote, valorize the interaction of architecture and human mind and reveal hidden complexities which so far have escaped measurement and rational analysis. Because currently our environments lack stimuli addressing our senses, and form seems to be ruling instead of emotive atmospheres. The human's strongest sense is what we perceive with our eyes, and without light, which this talk is going to be about, there wouldn't be anything to perceive. So let's talk about the problems caused through misunderstanding light over the last centuries. Our lifestyle has shifted from spending most of our time outside to barely being exposed to natural light. Lives happen inside where we are exposed to mainly artificial light. Not only the amount, but also the spectral composition of it differs from natural light, which latest studies identified as causes for mental and physical health issues. Besides these factors, natural light additionally changes throughout the day, offering a variety of wavelengths at certain times of the day. Our environments are lacking a qualitative use of light. Instead, as Henry Plummer beautifully described, light's value is diminished by uniform illumination, becoming shadowless and dead. So what if we rethink natural light and see its qualities instead of focusing on the quantities, guiding its wavelength through architecture, creating vivid environments which empower, as Bachelard once said, the integration for the thoughts, memories, and dreams of mankind. Le Corbusier pronounced, "Natural light is the key to well-being," and so did Louis Kahn with his statement, "To me, natural light is the only light because it has mood." We have to understand architectural elements as optical instruments, shaping light through reflection and transmission. This way, light becomes the paper and shadow the words for a building story. But just as a good writer has to compose a story, architects are challenged to do the same. It seems easy to simply talk about changing the way we work with natural light, after researching on this topic for a rather long time. But more importantly, I want to highlight challenges I was facing in the process of creating this design strategy, challenges which you will encounter as well. First of all, architecture does not simply need light. Light needs architecture just as much. We have to remember we cannot perceive light unless it interacts with a different medium. Focusing on the quality of light inside a space instead of just the quantity means thinking about architecture as an optical tool to transform the properties of light. Second, as Henry Plummer explains, the adaptability of the human eye makes variations in the quantity of light insignificant, which means we perceive light relative to its context. In order to understand how we perceive light, it is important to understand the mechanisms of our eyes and the progress behind it. Because light should not be a matter of function, but a matter of experience. Last, it is important to not forget that architecture is not a static art. It is dynamic. Through movement, the light story transforms from a static moment into a cinematic experience, reviving these shadowless and dead spaces. Instead of understanding architecture just rationally, architects have to design poetically, identifying themselves with their work and feeling empathy. This talk focuses on the exploration and analyzation of natural light's role in experiencing architecture. Through careful examination of the science behind light, the ways of interaction with architecture, and the perceptual mechanisms, the role natural light plays in our experience is being defined. But not only is it about the definition, today I also structure those findings and present a framework for the resulting design strategy. The intent was to translate neuroscientific and biological research in order to make it available to the design process. With our time today being limited, I will just briefly describe the different steps, not going into detail. It is more important for you to get an idea of the approach for now than to being overwhelmed with too many science facts at once. So let's start with the most important question. What is light? This simple question cannot be answered with one definition, as light does not have a unique meaning. The understanding of light changed in history as the technology behind capturing this matter developed over time. Today we know natural light is a product of the solar radiation emitted by the sun in form of electromagnetic waves. Its energy preserves life on Earth and regulates our climate. Light travels in waves with different frequencies, and the human body can perceive only a small portion of the spectrum. Light itself has no color. It is only when different wavelengths of radiation reflect off surfaces in our environment and enter our eye that we have an experience that we name as color. Before analyzing how humans perceive light, it is important to understand how light interacts with our built environment. When light waves reach a medium with different optical properties, the direction of the wave is changing and split into three. One part of the previous wave is being transmitted and continues in a new material. One is being absorbed, and the last one is being reflected into the first medium. This phenomenon does not occur accidentally. It is based on the predictable behavior of light waves and a mathematical formula called Snell's law derived from this. We sense the world in different ways. We feel our environment with our skin, smell it with our nose, hear it with our ears, and see it with our eyes. Through evolution, vision became the main sense for human beings, involving around 30% of the cerebral cortex. But we only see what our brain translates from the given input. Our brain is constantly trying to make sense of our surroundings. One key factor about vision or senses in general is that by trying to understand, our brain compares, whether it is a situation which it compares to previous experience in order to determine the right reaction, or the brightness of light. Humans cannot perceive an absolute brightness, and everything we see is relative and subjective. Our reaction relies on our experience, and so does our perception. But besides just vision, light can influence us in different ways. For example, researchers at the Salk Institute found a special protein called melanopsin, which is most sensitive to blue light. Once melanopsin detects blue light, the production of melatonin, which is necessary to become tired, is being suppressed. Independently from our visual sense, light can have a great impact on our circadian rhythm. Despite all the knowledge we gained over the past centuries, it is important to not reduce our humanity to a brain function. Now it is a matter of moving beyond this point of spatial and architectural design. You are encouraged to use the knowledge of these three fields as a tool to change our building story through something as transparent and intangible as light, from prose to poetry. Now ask yourself, what story do I want to tell with light? When continuing in the experiential space, we have to remember light's path traveling through space is not limited to one. Through dividing light's path into three sections facilitates the approach by structuring the areas of intervention for architects and designers. These different areas of intervention should not be seen as separate, but as potential areas to address the question, what story do you want to tell with light? Starting from the source, which in our case is the sun, architects can decide what kind of light enters the space depending on the orientation. Remember, the morning sun is different to the evening sun, and our body reacts differently to it. Second, looking at the openings themselves offers another area for interventions. Today, most openings in buildings, windows, have standard sizes. But what if these specifications are reconsidered? What if different types of glass was used? Last, it is important to think of light interacting with the space inside a building. After the light is being transmitted and filtered, it will reflect off surfaces inside a space until it reaches our eyes. Depending on the texture of the surface and the arrangement of the materials, different shadows and colors are formed. We are now going to look more closely at two areas of intervention, always with the question in mind, what story do I want to tell with light? First, we discuss the opening itself. Approaching the same goal, catching light, a window lets light in, but at the same time it as well offers a view into the outside world. This ambivalence is exciting, and by mentioning a few behavioral factors, they can be chosen more precisely to create particular emotive atmospheres. Not only plants are attracted to light, humans are too. Our inner clock runs according to the sunlight, and we tend to move towards it. This factor, described as phototropism, can be critical when designing with light, because it can be used to guide people through spaces. But besides just thinking about openings to get light inside a space, we as well have to carefully place walls. Humans have a tendency to move along walls. This behavior is a primal wayfinding strategy and a relic of our evolution. The wall-hugging trait called tigmotaxis happens unconsciously and instinctively. The edges of a space matter, and if planned well, life will naturally form around it. When light enters a space, most of the time the openings offer a view into the outside world. What we look at matters and is not equally judged. Humans express a tendency to focus on life and lifelike processes. About 99% of our human history was spent in the wild. Living indoors is a rather recent change of our human lifestyle, and it seems like our genes haven't adapted yet. Biophilia describes the urge to affiliate with other forms of life. Our bodies evolved in a rich environment which stimulated our senses. This remains important to our lives now as it enhances health, productivity, emotional, intellectual, and even spiritual well-being. Nature is a tool to creating an emotional attachment with a place. Another one of our preferences to look at is faces and people. This has as well been shaped throughout evolution. The attraction to human faces is associated with emotional engagement without conscious effort. People behave differently when they're around others. With this information, a window can function as a visual connection to other humans. Last, I want to highlight one aspect of physics of light, color mixing. There are two different ways one can create colors, either through additive color mixing or through subtractive color mixing. Addition is the process of light waves interacting with each other. The additive system utilizes lights. Computer screens are a perfect example for an application for the additive color system. Subtraction is the process of light waves being absorbed by pigments in, for example, paint. A red wall only appears red to us because the pigments in the paint absorb or subtract all the other color components besides red, which is reflected and perceived by our eyes. Color is simply a name for an experience. Light itself has no color. Through seeing architecture as an optical tool and using the different tools which we discussed earlier, we can think of different ways to play with colors. Light can reflect off colored walls, painting another wall, or filter through colored glass, leaving everything in the same color. There are many approaches to play with light and color. The structuring of the gathered research on natural light, as well as the focus on only a certain amount of aspects, allow architects to understand the interconnectivity of their field to neuroscience and result in a change of perspective in the design process. Instead of just thinking about getting light in, we now have a pattern to follow in order to ensure that we get the right light in at the right time and at the right place. And light's value is not being diminished through uniform illumination. Instead, light is used to provide the space with a desired narrative, revitalizing our shadowless and dead places, and essentially creating stimuli-rich and emotive environments for our bodies and minds to dwell in. Thank you for listening. I hope you have a great day.
Die Menge tobt.
Genau. Das schneiden wir rein, da gibt es am Ende.